Good afternoon, all. This is Winter. Today I'm coming to you to discuss We Are Not Your Kind, an album by Slipknot. This is part of our Bell Let's Talk week, and I'll be doing this alone and without Aegis. He's a bit busy over the last few weeks, and he's going to come to you with his own videos starting next week. Those are going to focus on gaming. Now, before we jump into the actual topic today, depression is a serious thing, and I wanted to provide a few resources for anyone who may need them. First, in Canada, there is a suicide assistance hotline that is at 1-833-456-4566. In the United States, there's a suicide prevention lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. We encourage you, if you need help, if you're feeling down, and if you are starting to have thoughts that concern you, especially in these trying times, reach out to somebody. Reach out to a professional, reach out to a friend if you need to. Nobody's going to judge you. People who care about you will want to help you. Okay, now that we're done the introduction, let's hop right into the album. This album focuses very much on the life of Corey Taylor, the lead singer of the band Slipknot. However, some songs do touch on topics brought forward by the other band members. Most of these songs deal with depression, and unlike the other album that we're covering this week, which is Indestructible by Disturbed, this album offers a much darker perspective on the topic, but it also offers what I consider to be a lot more hope. And that's why I wanted to cover this album. It goes to places that most people are not comfortable talking about. And when it does, it provides a glimmer of what it's like to try to move forward from these situations. Today, I'm going to cover the first 5 songs on the album, and then I will be coming to you with 2 more parts in order to have a 3-part total review of the album. The songs I'll be covering today are Insert Coin, Unsainted, Birth of the Cruel, Death Because of Death, and Nero Forte. These are the first 5 songs on the album, and we're going to start off with Insert Coin. Now, those of you who've listened to this album know this is not actually a song. There are multiple other tracks on this album that are like this. The band has said they were heavily inspired by the Beatles, specifically the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which is a fantastic album in and of itself. I'd recommend anyone who has not listened to it, give it a try. The band wanted this album to be much more conceptual than in the past and to cover things using the art of music and not just lyricism. This first song really touches on that. It has a steampunk, almost modern world feeling, and it really gives you impression that the world is waking up. Things slowly roll in, more and more noises are added. You hear the noises like planes taking off, and I think that kind of shows you what it's like to wake up in the modern world. You don't get a whole lot of quietness, you don't get a whole lot of peace. And while that intro takes place, you hear what I take to be the lead singer, again, Corey Taylor's, first thoughts of his day. I'm counting all the killers. Now, I don't think this is literal killers. I think this is people who, in his mind, killed him inside. In other words, ruined his good spirits, ruined his happiness, and ruined what he hoped to be a good life. Now, I want to say one more time before I get into later songs in the album, this album is extremely dark. I am no professional on the topic. I'm just covering my own opinions. And I hope that anyone listening to this understands that there are better resources available if you genuinely need to talk to someone about these issues. With that being said, let's start with the second song and the real opening track of the album, which is Unsainted. Now, this was the song that introduced me to the album, as I'm sure it was introduced to a lot of people. It was released before the album came out, I believe. And its opening words are, "I would never kill myself to save my soul," which immediately brings in 2 topics of the overall album: Faith and the fact that someone is bordering on ending their life, but believes it's not the right thing to do, and seems to understand the concept that if you kill yourself, that is the end, and there's no chance to fix things, make things better, or improve. And a lot of people who are suicidal think that they're helping the world or they're making things better if they end things, which is the thought of saving your soul by killing yourself. It's seen as a remediation. However, that is never the case. Very often, if not always, there are people left behind who are incredibly hurt, who will always miss you, and it will wind up causing a disastrous amount of damage to the people around you. And again, it's a disastrous amount of damage to you, whether or not you believe in the afterlife. You only get one chance to walk this earth, and to take it away from yourself takes away all opportunity from yourself. I think that's an important thing to consider. One of the next lines on the song, and yes, I am avoiding the chorus opening or the choir opening. I do enjoy it, but again, I just think that is touching on faith and having a strong introduction into the album. The next line that I want to touch on is "I was gone, but how was I to know?" Now, that's something that I find in my own personal life happened. You slowly become more and more negative, you slowly become more and more withdrawn, and you slowly get more and more hurt as time goes on. And you don't necessarily realize right away that you are suffering and that you are in a bad place. And by the time you realize, sometimes you are in that dark place. And I have come to believe one of the ways to avoid depression is to recognize the signs that it's coming. If you're starting to feel worn out, if you're starting to have negative thoughts, if you're starting to look at the people around you in a different light, it may be time to give yourself space and a breather and let yourself relax. If you're overstressed because of something like school or work, maybe request some mental health time. Maybe let yourself go out for an evening with friends. Because very often people do run with the concept of I need to push through and push through and push through until they realize they've done a lot of mental damage to themselves. And then it can be very, very hard to recover. However, Slipknot does make sure, again, in the opening song of this album, to cover the fact that this dark place that you can wind up in is just a situation that will eventually move by. It's a storm that'll eventually blow over. Corey Taylor says the line that this is just a rough patch. He's weathering the storm. And while this whole album is dark, it's a very good thing to start with, because this album is clearly sung by someone who's depressed. And to have them even say, I am aware that this will eventually end and things will get better, is a good point when they have many, many people listening to them, some of whom might be feeling the same way. You don't want to present the concept that depression is life and it will stay there your entire life once you have it. There are a lot of ways forward, and there's a lot of ways to end it. So I respect that even in this opening track and how dark this track is, it does offer that statement into his state of mind. He's aware it will get better if he just perseveres. Now, another line in this song talks about being trapped in a hole and feeling cold in hell. In other words, when you're suffering and isolated, you start to feel colder and colder, and that is as a person. Your emotions begin to overwhelm you, your happiness fades, and sometimes even your will to care about other people begins to fade. If you feel that, or you're starting to feel that, that is usually a cue that you should stop and take a look at a situation you're in. Know those kinds of indicators that you're getting yourself into a bad mental spot. Now, as this album progresses, again, I would like to say this is likely going to be a 2-hour discussion. There's going to be a lot of details about how to get yourself out of these places once you're in them. But knowing the indicators and knowing how to avoid getting there in the first place is a good first step. If if you are having negative thoughts, even if they're not overwhelming your life, it may be a good idea to go and seek help and speak to a therapist or talk to your friends about what you're feeling about. Everyone has their own problems. You don't want to overwhelm everybody by constantly talking about things. But yes, if you're in a bad spot, speak to someone you trust. They will make time for you and they will try to help you. Another topic in this song is that it's constantly referring to a loss or a lack of faith. There are references to being your own God, but there's also references to people who find hope in a book, which the lead singer cannot find himself. This is something that I've also struggled with. I have read the Bible, and I've read part of the Quran, and I've never been able to connect myself fully with religion. I think if you have faith and you use it in a positive way and not to repress other people, faith can be a very good way of finding hope. It is a good way to feel like there's somebody above who cares about you. It's a good way to feel connected to the people around you. And even just going to church can provide you a community where you feel safe. So for those of you who may be listening who do have faith, know that even though this album will cover the topic of faith, sometimes in very negative ways, I believe that Corey Taylor, as well as myself, acknowledge that faith can bring you strength. It just isn't necessarily for everybody. And if you have friends, especially people in your life who aren't faithful, it's okay to have a conversation with them and see if they would be interested in the topic of faith. But if they're not, don't pressure them. It's not your place. Now, one of the next quotes I want to talk about in this song is in the chorus. The quote is, "I didn't come so far to sink so low. I'm finally holding on to letting go." Now, clearly, this song was written either directly after Corey's breakup with his wife or after he had already seeked out help and found a way forward with his depression. And again, it's another glimmer of hope in an album that's rather dark. It is very common for people who have suffered depression to struggle when recovering. It's not unlike addiction scenarios. You take 2 steps forward and then something knocks you back a step. Please understand, if you have never had these issues and if you're going through them right now, that's not uncommon. Everybody has trials and tribulations in their life. And if you are making progress and you have 1 slip up, 2 slip ups, that's perfectly okay. Continue to work on yourself, continue to work on what makes you happy, continue to search out hobbies that make you happy. Bad situations will happen in your life. You can't isolate yourself away from them. So just remember, if you are working your way out of depression or a bad state of mind, don't let 1 or 2 bad situations drive you back into a state of depression. You've come further than you think you have, and continue to look forward. Now, I've already referenced the fact that Corey, and I'm going to call him Corey instead of Corey Taylor because I don't think saying his last name is necessary every time. This song also brings in the concept of failed friendships and relationships, and that becomes another heavy topic in this album, people who you've trusted letting you down. And I want to quote the song again, where he says, "Did you think you could win and fill me in? Did you think you could do it again? I'm not your sin. I was all you wanted and more, but you didn't want me. I was more than you thought I could be, so I'm setting you free, I'm setting you free. But you've killed the saint in me. How dare you murder me? You killed the saint in me." So I think what this comes from is the concept of certain people wanting to be the savior and almost seeking out damaged people and fixing them. That can happen in relationships. Some people like to have someone they're constantly repairing. And that's what I think the lines, "Did you think you could win and fill me in" means. Did you really think you could come into my life and fill in all the holes? Now, I don't discourage people from allowing people into their life that are fixers. Having someone that notices that you have problems and wants to help you is not necessarily a bad thing. But if the only reason they're doing it is to inflate their own ego or to make themselves feel like a hero, it's different than trying to be helpful to someone because you care about them. And remember that when you're on the flip side of this, if you're trying to help someone, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. You care about them and you want them to be better, not you're trying to make yourself feel better about yourself. Because people will notice the difference. I don't know how to explain it, but I've had people in my life that were clearly only trying to help because they had the complex that they felt like they needed to. And it didn't feel good to feel like I was a charity case or to feel like I was someone's fix me up. It can actually make things worse. Then there's the lines about not being the person's sin and that you were all that someone wanted you to be, but you weren't what they wanted. Now, here's a sad fact. Someone could write out everything they want in a friend or a partner on paper, and you can match every single one of those wants, from looks to your characteristics to your career to how you interact with them. And the simple fact is, they may still not love you as a friend or as a partner. That doesn't mean you failed. And I think it's important that he notes in this line, I'm setting you free. To be what someone needs, but not to be the person they need, is common. It's a weird part of human psychology. We are not just checkboxes, and that's okay. If you ever find yourself in a relationship with someone where you think that you're giving them everything you can and it's more than enough, and it just doesn't seem to be helping, don't cling on. Sometimes it's better to move on for everybody involved. And this album does cover that quite a bit, especially in scenarios where two damaged people are trying to help each other. Sometimes it's not better to fight and continue to try to make things work when they don't. And I mean that about friends and about relationships. When things don't work, sometimes sadly it is better to go your separate ways. And you may be a person like me. I struggle to let people go because I believe in loyalty once someone has earned my friendship. But sometimes that is the way to be. And I encourage you, if you have people in your life that you feel like you've given everything to, and they're not reciprocating it or they don't care, step away if you need to. Don't let it affect your mental health. It is not a problem with you, and I want to be very clear, it's not necessarily a problem with them. Sometimes human relationships just don't work. Now, the song's final topic, and what ties back to the title Unsainted. You've killed the saint in me, how dare you martyr me? So these are the last lines in the song I want to talk about. They're very dark, but I can connect with these. When I was younger and a teenager, I was not sheltered is not the right word, but I was very upbeat, optimistic, and bubbly. I'm very extroverted in an odd way. I'm actually a very nervous person. I'm very uncomfortable in groups, but I like to talk to people, especially one-on-one. That's where I feel most comfortable. Unfortunately, I ran into a string of people who did not want the best for me, and I trusted them and made mistakes, and it worked out poorly for me. And it wound up damaging my ability to trust other people. It wound up damaging my optimism, and it wound up damaging how I interact with people in general. And I look back on it, and I do wonder, why did these people do this to me? I had nothing but positive intentions. I had nothing but goodwill towards them, and they burned me. And in a way, the line, you killed the saint in me, is truthful. You killed a side of me that I wish I still had today. And they will never hear this. They will never listen to this. But it is difficult to understand, even as an adult, why those people thought it was okay to treat me the way they did. Do I forgive them? Yes. Am I moving on? Yes. But I believe that's an important part of this song is if you are a person who has an opportunity to mistreat someone you care about, or someone who trusts you, or someone who you have power over, really consider what impact that's going to have on somebody else. It may last a lot longer than you think. The impacts may go for far longer than you think they ever will. And I would bet they would outlast the short term benefits you might get from doing something like that to them. And with that, I think it's a very good segue into the second true song of this album, Birth of the Cruel. Now, this song again covers the topics of faith and specifically temptation. The cruel person that's being born is the person who's speaking in the song. And the song makes that very clear. This is not about people in power. This is not about abusers. This is not about the people who mistreated someone. This is about someone who has become cruel because of their life experiences. So I want to go into that in detail because I think it's important for the topic of this entire album is how does what you do to somebody else cause them to change? Sorry, guys, I just have to move. My upstairs neighbor is being a bit noisy. So, first of all, let's hop right into why I think this song is about someone losing the light in themselves and it turns them into a darker and less caring person. The song starts off with a priest speaking in a way that sounds like they're talking down on somebody. To quote the beginning, it says, "Let him be provoked by self-control." Now, I think this is something we touched on in our conversation about Disturbed. This is keeping something bottled up until it makes you sadder and angrier. It might feel like the right thing to do is to always bottle up what's eating you. But eventually your own self-control might bite you in the fact that it becomes worse than it was. Again, speak to someone early, don't wait until it's late. The next line in the song I want to talk about is, "I'm just a Judas looking for a silver line." Now, this touches on a secondary topic we talked about in the Disturbed album. When you let yourself become this type of person, you can wind up hurting other people. Your inability to connect with other people because you're depressed and you're angry can wind up having negative impacts on those people. In other words, he considers himself a Judas for some of the things he's done. But what those people don't realize is that he's busy looking for his own silver line. In other words, he's looking for the goodness in the world. He's looking for the happiness in the world, but he's not finding it. And that's what's causing him to have the persona where he betrays other people. Now the song gets into almost like a anthem song for people who have these issues. It says, "Let's hear it for the damaged, who understands but the broken, developed in the arms of spite." Now, there was a famous line years ago where somebody said, and I don't remember who, that you can't hear music until your heart begins to break. And I think that's true. I think a lot of good music comes from people who have been hurt, who are sad, and they're using the art to release those feelings. And to me, metal is one step further. You can't hear metal properly until your soul begins to break, until something has genuinely been taken out of you that you're concerned you'll never get back. And I think that generally comes from the feelings of anger and resentment towards people that have done things to you. And this quote is important about that. It talks about how being broken and permanently damaged is developed in the arms of feeling spited by other people. And it can feel like a source of strength, but a lot of the times it's a source of more damage in your life. Now, in the chorus, it talks about that strength. And again, this is something that's talked about in the Disturbed album we covered. where it says, "Blessed are the fires that have burned me." Listen to this. The lesson is never underestimate the agony, the death of a fool, the birth of the cruel. So these lines have a lot to unpack. First of all, it's similar to the My Chemical Romance song, "Thank You for the Venom." And even Eminem brings it up a lot in his songs. It's basically saying, I may hate someone for what they did to me, but I also feel like I should thank them because it made me who I am. And that can be true. Um, there can be positives from having people mistreat you and do you wrong. It can help you grow, but you can't let it be everything. You also need to see the positives. And then the second line says to never underestimate the agony. And I think this is targeted at people who maybe have never experienced deep depression themselves. It's easy to underestimate what someone else is feeling. In fact, I think most of us go through phases where we underestimate someone else's emotions. And telling someone, just pick yourself up, just carry on, just be better, just don't think about it, are easy things to say, and they're much harder to do. And just be careful when you're talking to someone who's depressed, because it can actually make them feel worse that you think it should be that easy for them to be better. And it will make them question sometimes, is it them that's the problem? And you don't want to make someone feel like that. You know, when someone's already struggling with self-hate, making them feel like they're a problem, and I know that's often not people's intentions, but making them feel like that can make the pain deeper. And the last line of the song, or the last line of the chorus, is "Death of the fool, birth of the cruel." And we talked about this as well on the Disturbed album, that sometimes the death of the naivety and the bubbly outside feeling of everyone's going to be good for you is not necessarily a bad thing. Because especially getting into the real world, you need to know the warning signs that someone is not who you want them to be. So I can see the benefit in the line of "death of the fool," but the negative side is "birth of the cruel." If you don't just take those lessons and learn from them, if you really become bitter and angry and hateful and think that the world deserves your scorn, you're going to put yourself in a place where you have nobody. And even worse than that, you might contribute to making somebody else feel how you feel. And again, that's a short term feeling where you might be happy you did that to someone, but remember how you felt when someone did it to you. So just think about those things. The next quote I want to talk about in the song is, "Remember how you spent the best part of forever in a state of pure disease. It was another thing altogether to forget what you brought, or to forget that you brought out the worst in me. Hey, karma, you don't feel like I do. You just wish you'd hate like I do. We are the bitter, the maladjusted, and wise, fighting off a generation that is up too uptight." So this line is talking about having to deal with conformity. And I believe this might be, again, about Corey's ex-wife, but it's about trying to shape someone to what you think is good. And again, the problem with that is you can make someone feel like they're wrong. In other words, you can make someone feel like a bad person. You can make someone feel like they're not enough. You can make someone feel like they deserve to be hated. Yes, there are times when you need to talk to someone about the way they act or the way they've acted, but always be very careful not to come off as someone who purely wants to lecture and scorn someone. Because one, they will develop a resentment towards you, and two, they might develop a resentment towards themselves. And the last line does tie in global conversations right now about how our generation is too uptight. And that's a difficult topic. I don't want to go into it too deeply, but it still ties into conformity. As much as our generation's trying to progress, we still have a lot of things where we beat down people who don't conform to a perfect society. And I think that can be the source of a lot of depression, especially in gray area situations. So just be careful how you treat people. It matters, and it can really impact their future, and it can impact their present. And that is why the last quote that I want to talk about in this song is so important. Corey says, "Let's not forget we're all guilty. In other words, people who put themselves up on a pedestal and people who kind of don't think that their crap stinks are wrong. We've all done things wrong in our life. We all have imperfections in our personalities. We all have imperfections in our looks. And the people who hold themselves above all that and look down on other people, be it for reasons of faith, be it for reasons of ego, be it for reasons of power, are wrong. And remember that when you're feeling bad about yourself. Everyone has flaws. And one of the biggest flaws can be something like ego, where you talk down on other people and you make them feel bad about themselves. Just remember that. If you spend your whole life constantly being condescending and making other people be in a bad mental state, no matter how rich you get, no matter how powerful you get, you probably negatively contributed overall to the world. Now, the outro again sounds like a priest, and he tells the person who's been singing throughout the song to go back to hell where they belong. And that's part of why letting yourself becoming warped by negative thoughts can be so difficult and can cause so many problems, is eventually people will believe you deserve what you're getting. If you conform to the negative things that they think about you and the negative situations around you, if you become what's caused you to feel sad or depressed or angry, a lot of people are just going to look at you the way they look at people who've caused this to you. They will look at it as you deserve what you get. And it's really unfortunate and it's really sad, but I think most people who become the people who do this to other people started off as being the one who was bullied, put down, scorned, and eventually that twisted them into a person who would do it to someone else. I would beg anyone who's in these scenarios to consider that while you're recovering. Don't let it become a part of your personality to put other people down to make you feel better. Now, the next song is another, intro song or another interlude. It's called Death Because of Death. And basically the entire song is repeating death because of you, over and over again. It's likely not talking about literal death. I'm guessing it's talking about dying inside. And based on what Nero Forte and a few other songs on this album are about, I would suspect that this interlude is two people who feel dead inside and damaged are causing more damage to each other by either trying to help each other and failing, or by trying to improve each other and failing. Also, the lyrics in the song and the way they're spoken have a level of sadness and a level of anger. And these are two conflicting feelings that are very often associated with depression. You feel very sad, and then you get very angry at the world around you for what it's done to you. Both of those emotions in too much quantity can be damaging, and it can lead to cycles like what this song shows. You will just keep damaging each other. If you're in a relationship with someone who is having mental health problems and you also have mental health problems, it might not work out well if you both are constantly leaning into each other and intentionally hurting each other more. And that's one of those scenarios where it might just be smarter for both parties to walk away. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be helpful for someone when you're damaged yourself, because sometimes the best people to help are people who understand. But just be careful that if you're in a fragile mental state, and so is the other person, that you think through what you're going to say and what you're going to do to try to help them. And try not to let your own negative mental state cause you to do things to them that are going to make them feel worse. So, now that we're done the introduction, let's talk about the last song for today, Nero Forte. Now, the title of the song is referring to powerful darkness. It's very similar to The Night by Disturbed. It's talking about depression. And the difference in this song and the Disturbed song is that Corey seems to be personifying depression through his wife, which is the person that he seems to believe brought on his depression this time around. And most of the song appears to be able to be read either talking about an actual person or a personification of depression. The first quote I want to talk about is, "If you are lost in hell, you will find no peace." In other words, this is saying if depression absorbs you, it may prevent you from finding happiness. It's important not to shut yourself down, and I know I've said that many times, but isolation is an important and difficult part of depression. If you isolate yourself from everybody, it will stop you from finding the thing that will make you happier. If you are sad and you feel alone, reach out to your friends, go out and hang out, join a sport, find a hobby that lets you be in public. It's not easy. I am introverted when it comes to large groups of people, but it helps me a lot mentally to just get out and do it. And eventually, at least for me, you're able to get over that anxiety and just enjoy yourself. And one of my biggest fears about dealing with groups of people, and the reason why sometimes I isolate myself, is I'm afraid when I'm with a group that the group is going to judge me. I've been in scenarios where an entire group of people has disliked me, and it's impacted the one or two people in that group who did like me. So I know what it feels like to be concerned about the disdain of a group and how they can gang up on you or even talk to each other and meld each other's opinions of you. But humans are herd animals. You have to take that risk. And even if it fails once, twice, 3 times, eventually you will find people who accept you for you. For me, it became getting back into sports that I enjoyed, like hockey, and starting to go to things like Friday Night Magic. For years, I avoided playing Magic cards because people told me it was for losers. It wasn't for adults. But some of the best people I met in a long time came from when I went back to playing Magic. No, they were not the typical version of what a cool person was, but they enjoyed a lot of the same things as me, and they were willing to talk about topics that actually made me feel good. So I encourage people, search out things you enjoy, even if they're not the norm, and find groups of people who enjoy it to do it with you. Now, another quote in this song, and he says it a lot in this song, is, "That's what you do best." And at first, I think this is about depression. Depression weighing you down, it makes you wallow in it, and this traps you in it. Depression is best at making you feel more depressed. It makes you feel like a failure. It makes you not work hard. It makes you give up. Therefore, you fail more. Therefore, you feel worse. It makes you feel like you're not a good friend. You're not a good partner for someone. Therefore, you don't put as much effort into it. Therefore, you are a worse partner and a worse friend. And therefore, you feel worse. It's a vicious, vicious cycle. And it ties into that opening part of this track. That feeling dead inside is a cycle. And the only way to get out of it is to break it. You need to find a point where you say, that's enough. I need to try to do better. And even if I fail a few times, I'm not going to fail forever. And that will take depression and force it back. And eventually you will improve. Unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately because one overarching theme of this album is that it does target Corey Taylor's wife, whether she deserves it or not. I do think that borders on the risk of forcing his ex-wife to feel depressed, and I don't support that, but I want to cover this album genuinely. It's from a hurt person, and what they're saying is their choice, and therefore I want to cover it right. So first of all, I want to cover the quote that I know, and even if I didn't, I would lie, so many would believe it. Stand up and resist the chains of all the people in belligerent sick restraint. I wasn't enough, you bled me dry. Which way is up? Oh, you're a lie and a fake. I hope the truth is not too late. So, the first part of this is about people who are trying to help. And I think all of us have done this at one point in time. Sometimes what people say to you is just generically factual. You need to try to feel better. You need to try to carry on. You need to try to forget the people who hurt you. And you will just say, I know, over and over again. But the fact is, if you're not doing it, you still don't know. You're not actually doing it. You're not actually working on it. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're just pushing it aside, you're not acknowledging the fact that it really will help. I encourage you, the basics are a good first step. Cut out the people who are hurting you. Cut out the scenario that's making you feel bad about yourself. work hard on something that maybe you feel like you're procrastinating on. It becomes too easy to just not do those first steps when you're feeling depressed. But self improvement is a great way to start to feel better about yourself. And then there is the part where even if someone's telling you something you don't know about, you're so depressed and you're so annoyed and you're so tired of dealing with the situation, you don't want to hear it anyway. In which case, I would say if someone's talking to you about something that might actually help and you haven't thought of it before, don't just throw it away. Listen, especially if they care. Now, the problem is there is the flip side, and this ties back into someone who's only doing it for their own gain. And that might be a God complex, that might be a saint complex, that might just be it inflates their ego to feel like they're a hero to people. But saying you're a lie and a fake is a serious thing. To do that for someone just for your own reasons isn't you being a good person. And especially if you're the kind of person who it sounds like Corey's accusing his ex wife of being, where you try to help someone, but on the flip side, in other words, with the other hand, you're constantly berating them. You're constantly telling them they're not good enough. You're constantly, and this is a reference to later in the album, telling people lies about the person you're seeing because you're upset yourself or you have reasons that you want to hurt them. It doesn't help when you're a contributor and on the flip side, you're trying to help them. If you're trying to help someone, try to help them. Understand that there is a line between helping and just flat out making someone feel bad about themselves. And one way to say that is if something is nitpicky and tiresome, and even especially if you brought it up before and the person doesn't seem to care, and especially if you have like 10 or 20 of those nitpicky things to say to someone, it might just be better to let it go because you're probably not helping them feel better. You're probably not helping your relationship with them. And it's probably not helping some of the more important things you have to say to get through. So, the next part of the song I want to talk about is near the very end. And this is a very long quote, so I apologize to everybody listening. The line is, "Why was it so easy for you? Did I deserve the abuse? I can't believe I let it in. Not what I wanted. See through your bull blank. You're so traumatic, true to your form of every consequence, unintimidated, till the very end. It'll never happen again. Was it a lie? Many mother blanks. That's what you do best. That's what you do best. That's what you do best." And in the background, a lot of these words are repeated. And when they are repeated, it spells out, "Why did I not see your true face until it was too late? Lie, lie. That's what you do best." So in the background, there's a bit of a subliminal message here that Corey was unable to see his ex-wife and maybe even some of his ex-friends' true faces until it became too late and they had already done their damage to him. Now, I don't believe people have a secret hidden face or they can be two-faced. I believe people in general are multifaceted. And especially when you come to the end of a friendship or the end of a relationship, you can see a side of them you've never seen before because they're also hurt. They're also damaged. They're also upset at you and angry at you. And they may do things that you don't like. And it's okay to be hurt and to be upset at them. But maybe don't hate them. Try to understand that they have their own reasons for saying and doing the things that they do. And it would be great if eventually you apologized to each other and fixed yourself. But this album is a great example. Corey Taylor is very publicly tearing down his wife. And yes, throughout this album, he talks about how she talks behind his back and everything else. And she scorned him. She made him feel bad. But this album itself is him doing the same thing. And he's doing it for a reason. And I'm sure she feels like she's doing it for a reason. So just remember, if things go badly with a relationship, friends or otherwise, try to understand the other person might not actually be an awful person. They might just be as upset as you are, and they might be handling it poorly. Now, it does go back to the why was it so easy for you to betray me and abuse me and hurt me? And I can understand that feeling. Again, I felt it before, but remember, other people have reasons they do things too. And you might never be told why they're doing what they've done, but it might not be about you. And that's one of the most important things. If you've given your best and you've done your best and you've been a true friend and someone still stabs you in the back or someone still disappears from your life, it might not be your fault. And it might not be anything you've done wrong. Even if they try to make it seem that way, it may be problems that person is having themselves. Because a large part of the concept of this album is everybody has problems in their life. Please think about that when you feel bad. Please think about that when you're struggling. Everyone has problems. The people around you are not living perfect lives, whether or not that's what they try to present. And try to be better to people for that reason. Everybody should try to be better to everybody else through the understanding that everybody else has struggles. And the day that you decide to say something bad to someone might be the worst day in their life and you just don't know it yet. And all you've done is add it to the doggy pile. You never know when someone is depressed. You never know when someone's feeling down. So if that's a good thing that comes out of this song, remember that. If you're part of the doggy pile, even if you feel like it's justified, you may be doing a lot more damage than you think you are. I think that's a good way to wrap up part one. I want to wish everybody well. I hope that Bell Let's Talk goes well this year, especially with everything going on in the world. I think this is an important topic. If you need help, seek help. I'll see you guys in part two and have a great afternoon.